sink into a crisis that at some point may be unable to be reversed. Different mask, same face. Be afraid, be very afraid. The big bad monster's coming now that we've invented him. Economic crisis. And he's just a puppet. And his economic team, people like Larry Summers, Paul Volcker, Tim Geithner, they're straight from the very institutions that created the crisis, and they've been placed in positions to solve the crisis, which means giving more and more money to the banks that they represent, trillions of dollars. And they're talking about it being the bigger crisis than the 1930s. In many ways, on many levels, I think that's absolutely right. What they want, and I've been saying this since November now, what they want, and with two-thirds there, don't want to be the bringer of bad news, but, you know, let's face it, was to crash the economy first of all and create a massive problem. Stage two is for those that have created the problem to come into government and hurl enormous amounts of cuckoo land money at the problem, because what they wanted to do in stage two is empty the weapons of government to respond to the crisis. And once those weapons, those guns have been emptied in terms of response possibilities, then they want to crash it here and crash it in a way that there can be no government response. They want to create absolute chaos on so many levels so that the people say, save us, do something. And the do something will bring in this centralized, global, fascist, Orwellian state. This, as a result of it. Not just a financial crisis, they want wars as well. They want to, first of all, destroy America, because if you want a world government, then you can't have superpowers in the world that can say no to the world government financially and militarily. So as I've been saying for years now, what we're seeing in America is using America to destroy America. It's being destroyed militarily because it's fighting on so many fronts, and financially, I was there for 2 months recently. That country is on the brink of financial catastrophe. Not just a crisis, catastrophe. With what's going on there, which has not hit the public arena yet. And the other thing they want in problem, reaction, solution is people to riot and be violent in response to what's going on, because then they've got a problem that they can offer the solution to, which is increases in the police state to meet the problem of violent reaction of the public to the problems they've created, and also to justify putting people into these concentration camps, you can only call them, holding centers they're called, which exist all over the world, particularly in America, under an organization called FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency. Again, people around the conspiracy research world have been talking about this now for 10 years, and it's coming to pass. And you know, I don't believe in violence. I will not be violent. I will not be violent. I don't care what the situation is. I do want to be violent. I'm not going to add my energy to that crap. But a lot of people would be in response to this, and to do that, you need to get rid of their guns. That's why when Hitler came in, he wanted to disarm the population, because then a big problem of resistance had gone. It's Rahm Emanuel that is now leading the campaign in America to take away more and more guns from the population, because he knows that an armed population prepared to use them in certain situations makes them much more difficult to control. But I would say this, Martin Luther King, the limitation of riots, moral questions aside, is that they cannot win, and their participants know it. Hence, rioting is not revolutionary but reactionary, because it invites defeat. It involves an emotional catharsis, but it must be followed by a sense of futility. And what we need is not to riot, not to be violent, not even to go in mass protests. So be my guest if people want to do that. But they're not frightened of protests, this gang. They're terrified of us not complying with our own enslavement. And when we stop doing that, they've lost their power. No violence necessary. They want us to be violent. Inside job, problem, reaction, solution, 9/11. Won't go into all that now, but it's been well documented. But another classic one. And interestingly, 1997, the Grand Chessboard, Brzezinski book. Moreover, as America becomes an increasingly multicultural society, it may find it more difficult to fashion a consensus on foreign policy issues, except in the circumstances of a truly massive and widely perceived direct external threat. What was it? 3 years later? 4 years later? Thank you. Massive external threat, which has justified so much. I love that. So David Dees is a great artist. Anything like this in this presentation comes from David Dees, a brilliant artist who portrays real powerful statements in pictures like this. Jet fuel, that's a good one. These are buildings, by the way, in other parts of the world that burned incredibly more intensely than the Twin Towers, and none of them fell. That one seems to be falling, but it's not. It's the way the building is actually built. There you go. There you go. Put that where I can see it. Okay, we're not doing bad. There you go. Reichstag fire, which Hitler did. Blamed someone else for it, justified the takeover of the state as a result of it. Same thing, problem, reaction, solution. Again, Saddam Hussein was the guy. We're going to go into Iraq because of Saddam Hussein. This is Donald Rumsfeld, the defense secretary at the time of the invasion of Iraq, meeting Saddam Hussein in 1983 to arrange for Reagan-Bush administration to ship chemical and biological weapons for use against the Iranians. This is an American mainstream newspaper report from 2002. Donald Rumsfeld, the US Defense Secretary and one of the most strident critics of Saddam Hussein, met the Iraqi president in 1983 to ease the way for US companies to sell biological and chemical weapons, including anthrax and bubonic plague cultures, according to newly declassified government documents. Again and again, you see people creating the problem who then become the people to solve the problem. He was on the board of a European engineering giant called ABB in 2000 when they sold nuclear equipment to North Korea. He then becomes defense secretary and says North Korea is a danger because it's got nuclear equipment. Alongside problem, reaction, solution comes what I call the totalitarian tiptoe. Very simple. You're going there to Z, but you're at A. And if you go in one leap, you know the change is going to be so vast, people are going to say, what's going on? So you go in as big a jump as you can, but you try not too big a jump that so many people will start to ask questions. And each jump is promoted and projected as unconnected to all the others. That's how the European Union, a centralized dictatorship now, was totalitarian tiptoed out of a free trade area. 75% of laws in Britain now originate in the European Union. And the European Union pass a law, a British Parliament or any other European Parliament pass a law, doesn't matter, that one takes precedent. They want the same in America with the North American Union, which Obama is going to be pushing. Fascism, you really think it would be this obvious. The stepping stone approach is what's got us this far, where so many stepping stones have now been made that it is becoming obvious to anyone with a mind. I'll quickly go through this because there's so much to get through, but it's like I say, I wish I had hours. The other coordinate is to understand that they want people to be a believer. They want people to believe in something, because once you have a belief system that is rigid, then you become less of a problem. They want religious belief systems, political belief systems, racial belief systems, self-identity belief systems, anything that puts you in a prison of the mind. Because you'll then filter through this process of the way the neurons fire in the brain, you will filter reality through the belief system. Religions. In the end, religions are invariably, the major religions are worshipping the same force. It's not explained like that, but that's what goes on. Again, out of Atlantis and Lemuria, and then those civilizations that followed, the worshipping of the moon goddess and the sun god, the worshipping of the moon and the sun, was prevalent. And it manifested in various religions, not least from this part of the world, which, if you think about it, is the religion factory. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Hinduism, all came out of this part of the world, these major religions. And when you strip them down, they are invariably sun and moon worshipping religions. So in Babylon, they worshipped the Queen Semiramis, the sun goddess, Nimrod, known as Baal or Bel, the sun god, and Tammuz, who was the fearing not paying the mortgage at the end of the month, fearing of having your house foreclosed. They all lock you in to a sense of needing to survive. And the other thing that these entities do is feed off human energy. And to feed off human energy, they have to pull humans into an energetic state that they can feed off. If you're in a state of harmony, they can't feed off it because never the twain shall meet vibrationally. So they pull us, or seek to pull us, into a state of disharmony, of stress, of fear, of conflict, of aggression, of anger, and all the rest of it, because that's pulling us into an energetic state that they can then feed off, because that's their energetic state. And they seem to operate in what an astrophysicist friend of mine called Giuliano Conforto calls interspace planes, which is like a neutral zone between dimensions, where you need to, as she puts it, find a source of energy, because there's not a natural source of energy there on the scale that there is within a fully fledged reality dimension, whatever you want to call it. And I said to Credo Mutwa, do you have anything in your culture that relates to interspace planes, these neutral zones? He said, oh yes, he said, we call them the heaven between heavens. He said, that's where the Chitahuri are. And so that takes them so close to visible light and the reality that we're experiencing. And what they're doing is feeding off human energy by manipulating us into an energetic state in which they can feed off, and also to keep us in mind and not open to consciousness. Years ago, last time I came to Australia, I had a strange experience. I spoke in Sydney, and afterwards I was introduced to this Freemason who said he was 33rd degree or something. He wanted to meet me, and because he wanted to know how I knew what I knew. He said, how do you know that? You're not supposed to know these things. So anyway, I met him, and he said, I said, I'm a good Freemason, he said. I'm trying to fight some of the bad things. I said, okay. He said, if you come to Canberra, he said, I'll show you around Canberra, and I'll show you the Freemasonry imagery. So, okay, I'll go. So I went to Canberra, and I met this guy, and he showed me all around the Parliament building and all the street plan around there and all the rest of it. And then he took me into the War Memorial, the War Museum Memorial in Canberra. And my God, it is ablaze with Illuminati and reptilian symbolism. And when you go into the part where the unknown soldier grave is, on the four corners and the pillars are depictions of soldiers, men and women, and then you've got the light coming up from the top of their head going up, and you've got a reptilian figure sitting above that, almost policing the connection to out there, and this satanic symbolism and all this stuff. And when you look at the sponsors of the War Museum, a number of them are like a who's who of the Illuminati in Australia, according to this guy. Anyway, I'll tell you what he said to me. He said, we need to get you some money. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah. He said, we need to get you some money to fund what you're doing. I said, well, hold on. I said, how are you going to do that? He said, we'll give you a credit card. I don't know who we was. He said, we'll give you a credit card. I said, well, how will that help me? He said, well, we fix the computer system so no matter how much you spend, it never registers. He says, that's how we get our money, right? So anyway, I thought, I'm not sure about that in the least. And we said goodbye. He said, look, I've got lots of things to tell you. And never heard from him again. Disappeared from the face of the bloody earth. He's still around in Australia, I'm sure, but there you go. So this interspace plane is one of the kind of stumbling blocks energetically, which is trying to manipulate us from getting connected to the full nature of who we are. So this is seems to be the structure. Certainly at this level, it goes further out up to that schism, I believe, but at this level, you've got the reptilian entities. And Nephilim, that was the name of the hybrid bloodline in the Bible, the Nephilim. Just one of many, many names that they're called around the world in different cultures. The reptilian entities possess they're hybrid stooges. And the secret society network within this reality manipulates the stooges and their gophers and agents into the positions of power at the top of the pyramids in all these different countries. These are the subsidiary networks I'm talking about. They then control all these other things like politics, finance, media, military, religion, and the royal networks, because that locks into them. And then down come the people. And these people at the top, who appear in everyday reality and on the news bulletins, often to be at odds with each other and fighting each other. There's lots of infighting goes on among these people because they're so imbalanced that of course they're going to fight for them, among themselves, but there is a level that knocks heads together when it gets in the way. And so they're manipulating, playing different countries and groups and Islamic and stuff off against each other. And if you notice, the people that declare the wars never bloody fight them. These people go off like silly sods and fight them. And these people who have nothing against these people, but those people tell them they should, and all the rest of it, and the people fight among themselves, creating great stress, great disharmony, energy to be absorbed, and all the rest of it, because they're manipulated by the tiny few into this stuff. I mean, if George Bush, boy George Bush, had been in Iraq when the first bullet was fired, he'd been under a bed in Houston when the second bugger went off. These people do not fight the wars, they just declare them. We fight the wars, and if we stop fighting the sodding wars and came together, we've made the whole system completely impotent. So these are schism people coming down the levels of reality. And they feed off the energy that we generate through our states of emotional and mental states, and they manipulate that. Now, the one energy they can't take, the many energies they can't take, that they're in harmony, but what we call love, the energy of the heart, no way they want anything to do with that. They can't cope with it, and they can't sync with it, and they want to shut that energy off, and that's what they do by manipulating society and playing us off against each other. There's a guy called Mr. Emoto, a Japanese researcher I spent a long time with, spent a whole weekend with once in London. We actually wrote a book together, funnily enough, just not writing, but just talking and it all being translated. And he's famous for filming water crystals where he has put the water in contact with various vibrational states, and indeed just writing love on the side of the container, or hate, or putting a mobile phone on it, or whatever. And what he then does is, and I've seen his laboratory and stuff in Tokyo, he freezes it very, very quickly. And what is then captured in the water crystal is the vibration of the love written on the side, because you write love, generates love, if that's the motive of writing love. Hate, all the rest of it. So that is what a water crystal exposed to words of love and appreciation looks like. This is what a water crystal looks like when it's exposed to hate. Now, that's the world before the schism. This is the world afterwards. And it's this energy that represented by that crystal that these guys want us to produce, and the operations, the level that they operate on themselves. So we need to be very careful about the way we talk to each other, the way we express things, because if you can put the word love on the side of a container of water and create that difference, or hate, imagine what we're doing to the energy field and our own individual energy fields as we interact when we are hurling abuse at each other. But that's what these guys want. They want to conflict, schism, break up. The society is just a manifestation of that schism. So that again is love and appreciation. This is a crystal from water that had a mobile phone tied to it. And everyone's got a mobile phone. Oh, got a mobile phone. They're ever so convenient. Yeah, they burn my brain. It's good. Ever so convenient. You don't have to get anyone to burn your brain for you, it does it automatically. So the idea, and my God, have they succeeded up to this point, is to turn humanity at war with itself. That's the way they do it. And in this film, Monsters, Inc., which I took my son to years ago when he was a little boy, I nearly fell off the bloody floor, because that was all about monsters going from the monster world where there was no source of energy into the human world, frightening children. The scream was caught in a kind of tube, and they brought it back to the monster world to be the power system of their world. And fear is the biggest, not just controller of humanity and suppressor of... Good. If we really look in the mirror and see the true reflection of ourselves, this system will collapse. As Martin Luther King said, the ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. We are at that time of challenge and controversy. Where do we stand? Comply or non-compliance? Free your mind from the programming that holds us in little me. Free ourselves from the hypnotic trance we've been put in. It's a mad, 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 mad world, yes. But why? Because what has been kept from us crucially, above all else, is who we are, the nature of life, and the nature of the reality that we live in. I started out after ridiculously outrageous things happened to me about 20 years ago. The top of my head blew off, and it was never the same again. Thank you, God. I started to ask big questions, because unless we ask the big questions, and most people don't, because we're so focused on survival and today, surviving another day, you never get the big answers, how can you? And when you ask the big questions, the world looks very different. You start to realize, for instance, that there is a multi-leveled conspiracy to enslave humanity on multi-levels, mentally, emotionally, and therefore physically. And some other questions I started to ask, and this is where I want to concentrate on in this this first section, because it's so important. Because in the second section, when I get into the conspiracy as it's unfolding today in our everyday lives, that will start to make so much more sense in terms of why society is as it is, why it's structured as it is, why things are done as they are, once we realize what reality is. Who are we? Where are we? What is reality? What is life? How many people in the world actually ask that in their entire lifetimes until they get towards the end, maybe? And when you ask those questions, you realize it's all an illusion. This physical world that we take so seriously, that we think is so real, is just an illusion decoded by our body computer system to give the illusion of solidity. Great American comedian Bill Hicks, who said this: all matter is merely energy condensed to a slow vibration. We are all one consciousness experiencing itself subjectively. There's no such thing as death. Life is only a dream, and we are the imagination of ourselves. Encapsulates it. And really the bottom line of the conspiracy is to manipulate our imagination of ourselves so that we imagine ourselves to be little me and powerless, and therefore controllable by the few. It's all an illusion. It sounds crazy to start with, but for the one and only time in my life in 2003 in the Brazilian rainforest, I took this psychoactive rainforest plant called ayahuasca. And some people have a bad experience. I had a fantastic experience. For 5 hours, this female voice, it took the theme of, or the expression of, this female voice, as loud as mine is now, talked to me for 5 hours about the nature of reality and how it was all an illusion, explaining why it was all an illusion. And it was hilarious. I mean, my feet were literally in the air a number of times. It was so funny, because it is funny when you realize what we take seriously. And I came back after that, and I started looking in the scientific area and quantum physics and all this stuff to see if I could support what that voice had said from the mainstream science and the cutting edge of science. And I found that you could do it easily. Why? Because science is a series of disciplines, vast numbers of disciplines, and the buggers never talk to each other. They don't connect their own dots within science. Why? Because they're not encouraged to. Indeed, the opposite from encouraged to, because once they connect the dots, woo, this is life then. And when you do connect the dots, you realize that if they did, they'd already realized that this reality is an illusion. I talked in London in May last year, and a friend of mine who is a healer and he's a scientist and he works in scientific circles, and he'd done this presentation or been at this event at the Royal Society, like the holy grail of science, mainstream science in London. And he's met all these people, and he comes to my talk, right? You know, I mean, I left school at 15 to play soccer. You know, I never passed an exam in my life. Thank you, God. Okay, so, and he met 4 or 5 of these guys who'd been at the Royal Society, mainstream scientists, and he said, what the hell are you doing here? And they said, well, we've come to hear it how it really is. Because they bloody knew this. But if they talked about it within their science, within their discipline, within their arena, the funding stops, the ridicule starts, and they no longer are able to progress within the mainstream science. Why? Why do you want to? Follow what is. So, all the time we are decoding reality in an apparently solid three-dimensional way. This is an amazing guy. You might have seen some of these on the internet. This is an amazing guy who draws chalk pictures on the pavement, and all the pictures you're going to see are on a flat pavement. But because of the way he draws them, he gets the brain to decode them in a three-dimensional form. He's tricking the brain into doing this. These are all on flat pavements. Incredible guy, what he does. And here's another example. Because the brain is decoding reality, and you can manipulate that, and that's another big thing of the conspiracy, which I'll get to. All these things are optical illusions, tricking the brain to read reality in a certain way, and it can be done on a very deep level, and it is. Again, is that a 7-section box, or is it or image, or is it a box, or what is it? It depends how your brain reads it. Most people seeing this for the first time will read that as a bird in the bush. Actually, it says a bird in the bush. Because the brain is used to certain things, you can drop things in that are there, but it doesn't read them because it reads according to the program that it's taken on. These kind of red colors are exactly the same, but because of their relationship to other colors, the brain reads them differently, and they appear to be not the same, but they are. As Einstein said, reality is an illusion, albeit a persistent one. And the reason for its persistence will become clear before we finish this first section. So I followed this amazing synchronicity that suddenly appeared in my life 20 years ago. And it took me through the 5-sense level of this and how secret societies connect and all that stuff. I'll get into that in the second section. And then it took me through interdimensional stuff, and eventually from 2003 onwards with that ayahuasca thing, right up to the present day, the whole focus of where my life has gone is the nature of reality and who we are and all that stuff, because this is the place where the key to open the door is. And, you know, it's great that that there are all this conspiracy research going on the level of, you know, engineered wars and stuff and backgrounds to Obama. It's very important that we know this. But if we only do that, then we're just learning more and more and more about our own prison. This stuff, can show us how to open the door, open the cell door. So when you ask the question, where are we? We're in a virtual reality universe. In so many ways now, technology, although on a far more basic level, is starting to mirror the reality we're actually experiencing. I saw this cartoon. I thought it was very apt. The universe is amazing, isn't it, Captain? It's very mysterious. A lot of things we don't know about, like dark matter, dark energy, multiverses. System error, reboot, reloading universe. We know less than you think. And although that's a kind of simple kind of analogy, that is basically what we're looking at, a virtual reality universe of incredible sophistication compared with the virtual reality that we have in this world now, but the theme is just the same. Even in this comparatively Stone Age level of virtual reality that we're in at the moment, things are getting more because this is where this is projected from. And see, what the system wants, and one of the key benefits from the system's point of view for us believing that everything's out there, is it wants us to believe that if we don't like what's out there, or what we perceive to be out there, we must change it out there. But there is no out there, so if we're going to change it out there, we're trying to change symbolically, not even symbolically, very accurately, we're trying to change a movie by screaming at the screen. It's not going to change. The movie's just going to run. We've got to go within and find the projector and what's projecting the movie and change that, and then the movie must change. This can only change when this changes. Because by the time it hits the screen and becomes this holographic reality, this illusory physical reality, it's a done deal. It's a done deal. There's no changing it now. There's no changing the movie when it hits the screen. It's done. We've got to change it before it hits the screen, and that means going within to the deeper levels of ourselves where we decode this stuff and therefore change it. Everything that we see is just in our head. Everything, friends, family, in the physical way, everything is in our heads and produced digitally in the end. And it's a virtual reality. On many ways, it works with the same binary system, though it's far more sophisticated, that you find in computer systems, on-off electrical charges. The binary system, although it's more sophisticated in other parts of the brain as well. And again, just like DNA, where the O's and the 1's are in relation to each other decides what appears on the screen. Same with DNA. Everything is information. Everything is information being decoded. And it's being decoded in a desperately narrow band of frequencies. We look out and we think we're seeing this vastness. And again, on one level, it does seem like that. But actually, it's a frequency range that's so tiny, it's funny. Even mainstream science says that of the mass matter that exists in this universe in various forms, the electromagnetic spectrum is 0.005% of what they perceive to exist in this universe. Visible light, which is the only frequency range that our eyes can access and allows our brain to decode into this reality, is a fraction of the 0.005%. As someone rightly said, humans are basically blind because we're operating on such a narrow frequency. This is like just a three-dimensional television station. And beyond this are other television stations which can interact with this one. That's what we call paranormal activity in many ways. Get into that in the second section. And so we're decoding this tiny range of frequencies into this reality. We say seeing is believing, but believing is seeing. Because how we decode reality decides on how we see reality, because it all takes place in the brain. The way the neurons fire and all the rest of it. And one of the things they found in experiments, I was seeing a film about this a couple of years ago, is that when you get a rigid belief system, the neurons fire in a certain network. And what that does is filter reality in relation to the way that network is firing. So when you get information coming into the brain that is at odds with the rigid belief system, those neuron pathways will fire in a certain way and will not decode that information in a way that affects the belief system. It's like just a filter that just only filters reality in a certain way. And then when you shift your belief system, the neuron networks, as before, break up and they fire in a different way. So belief systems are fundamental to filtering reality to perpetuate themselves. This is our base reality. We are energy. And it's only when we pass through the decoding system of the brain that we appear in our heads as three-dimensional physical bodies. And we can get right out there to many dimensions, which is what psychics do and people in consciousness do, or we can live in the record groove, going round and round and round. And of course, this is the thing about science. Scientists are themselves decoding reality according to their belief system. And so they're trying to understand how something works, but their belief system is decoding reality in a certain way. And so they never get it. When scientists are stuck in the left brain, they cannot decode these greater levels of reality and understanding of reality because their brain will not compute them. That's why they really look at people who say some of this stuff and they go, "You're crazy. Can't be." Because they can't get their heads around it. And it's like in pantomimes we have in Britain at Christmas, where, you know, one of the classic things they do is someone standing on the stage and someone will come behind them and the audience will say, "He's behind you." And then they'll turn around and the person will go with them and they'll say, "There's nobody there." And that's what scientists are doing, because they're looking at things and they're decoding them in a certain way and they can't see them because their brain won't compute it. And this is why the cutting-edge scientists are the ones that have a right brain that is active. And that's what a lot of people at the cutting edge of things like quantum physics are developing. Right brain view. As Einstein said, science without religion is lame, religion without science is blind. I would say this: science without consciousness is lame, religion without consciousness is blind. And indeed, with consciousness, there is no religion. Okay, final bit before we have a break. The holographic internet. This is what this reality is, in effect. And like I said a long time ago now, technology today is starting to mirror, in a much less sophisticated way, of course, but it's starting to mirror the reality we're experiencing. If you say to someone, "Tell me about the internet," they'd say it's graphics and websites and words and colors on a screen. Yes, it is. But the only place the internet exists in that form is on the screen. Everywhere else, it is electrical circuits and what have you. It's not what's on the screen. That's only just there, nowhere else. And you say to people, "Tell me about television." They say, "Oh, it's moving pictures on a screen." Yes, it is. But the only place television exists in that form is on the screen. Everywhere else, it's electronic circuits and frequency fields and all the rest of it. And it's the same with us. The only place this world exists is on the screen. And so many people over the years, scientists and what have you, have offered the possibility that this world only exists in this form when it's observed. Well, from the understanding we're getting now, that's exactly what it is. You know, when you play a DVD, it doesn't play the whole DVD on the screen. It plays that part of the DVD that is being read at that time. And what we're doing is, in the act of observation, we are decoding that part of the vibrational construct into this world, but only the part that we're actually observing. And if you could see the unobserved reality that we're experiencing at its prime level, it would just be vibrational, not solid or anything at all. So what is the matrix, as we call it? It is energetic information being read in various ways to create this illusory, vast, apparently infinite but not, world of solidity. And the other thing, key, that the body is, because it's many things, it's a fantastic creation. It is a crystalline receiver-transmitter, because that's how the decoding system works. We are decoding information, because people say, okay, if we're creating our own reality and all that stuff, how come we're all seeing the same theater now? Because there is a construct, like I call it the cosmic internet, which exists in vibrational form, which we are collectively decoding into this collective reality. You know, you go on the internet in South Africa or Sydney or London or China, or not so much China, but another place where they don't firewall it off, and you're seeing the same, experiencing the same collective reality, although you're in different parts of the world. Now, you can go to different websites, or you can go to the same website, and you might have different views of that website. That's your individual spin on this collective reality, but you're all experiencing the same collective reality on the World Wide Web. This reality is the same. There's a collective reality which we decode, so we all look out the window, and we'll see the same car going past, but we'll all have a different opinion on what we think of that car. The basic reality is the same. And we're crystalline. Do you know, we have trillions ultimately. They want to break Europe up into regions. Some maps have come out. Same in America. This is a map from the Nixon era where they showed America broken up into regions. And watch this in Australia. What the idea is to sell it to people as devolving power, like to the states or the regions or groups of states, devolving power, giving power to the people. The real reason is to break up the nation state so that there's no unified response to the edifice of power above, the superstates that they want. And of course, this has now moved, this centralization of power has moved so quickly and reached such a point, we have a name for it: globalization. Globalization is what? It's exactly the agenda I've been talking about all these years, the centralization of power in every area of our lives. And we have people of the left, and good luck to them, who protest against, you know, global injustice and the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund and all the rest of it. But what they don't seem to realize, because they reject and often lambast people like me, is all these different things they're protesting about is actually the same force under different names. And it's not just, as they seem to think, greedy corporations seeking more and more power. The corporations are not the origin of globalization, they are the vehicle for it, that's all. The origin is in the hidden forces behind the corporations that so many of the left refuse to accept exist. The idea is to make every part of the world dependent on every other part of the world, so self-sufficiency and self-government and control of our own lives and communities becomes impossible. That's what globalization is about. Free trade is the freedom to exploit. It's the freedom of corporations to make their products for a few cents on the dollar, paying starvation wages, and then bring them across the world without tariff barriers and get the biggest price they can in another part of the world. It's called free trade, freedom to exploit. But you can't be against free trade. Oh, you can. Watch me. And so all these organizations are eventually controlled by the same force. And this guy is the front man for taking it to the next level. That's why I keep calling him the used car salesman, because his role is one and one alone: sell the agenda to the people. And so the idea is to put us in these jails of control, homeland security, military dictatorship. This is Adolf Hitler selling the Gestapo, the creation of the Gestapo. An evil exists that threatens every man, woman, and child of this great nation. We must take steps to ensure our domestic security and protect our homeland. That's exactly what they said after 9/11 to justify homeland security and the police state. All over the place you find now cameras and surveillance. This is a poster after the London bombings: secure beneath watchful eyes on London transport, closed-circuit television cameras, we're protecting you. This is from Nazi Germany, 1934. Same bloody thing. Yeah, walls have ears, we're listening to you, we're watching you. Oh, this is a lovely one. Sheffield bus station in Britain. It's a bus station. You go there, you get on a bus, you go home. community bus station, poster, spit and run, you'll still get caught, DNA. Every bus, tram and interchange has DNA testing kits. Spit at the staff and you can be traced and prosecuted, even if we don't know what you look like, and your records will be on the national DNA database forever. And so in every country we're now seeing, because it's a movement, we're seeing the difference between the military and the police becoming less and less obvious. People being asked to spy on their neighbors and their friends. Hey, this guy Ike is in Melbourne, and he's inciting people to discord. Got to get around here fast. We're on our way. This is how to tell a terrorist now at the airport. You know. And so we got the movement towards microchips and identity cards and all that stuff. And this is the State Watch report in Europe, an organization just explaining how the cumulative nature of all these things I'm talking about are turning us into a police state very, very quickly. And the idea is to keep prodding us, telling us what to do, telling us what we can't do, making it difficult to do this, making it difficult to do that, and watching us and having punishments for whatever we bloody do. Keep quiet, shut up, you can't say that, oh no, go to a free speech zone, and all the rest of it. And cumulatively again, this is what it's about. And this is why we mustn't acquiesce to it. They have experiments in laboratories where they have rats or mice, and they have these mazes. And if you go down this part of the maze, there's an electronic shock equipment, and you go down there and the mouse gets shocked. After a few times, it's been shocked so often, you can take the equipment away so it can freely go without actually any shock. It will not go down there because its mind has been, through punishment, through hassle and pain, has been programmed not to go down there, only to go down this channel or that channel. And what's happening is that we are now all over the world being bombarded with so much instruction, so many orders, so many can't do's, so many punishments for the ridiculously small things, that they're basically prodding us so that we go into a state of acquiescence and subordination and just follow unquestioningly the diktats of authority. That's what it's about. It's about programming us through all these consequences that are now emerging by the day at ridiculous levels of detail in our lives. We mustn't acquiesce to that. This is what this is about. The taser, which is coming in all over the world. And 55,000 volts of electricity, which has killed a significant number of people around the world. And I saw a newspaper headline when these first came out in America, and it was written by this journalist who'd seen it happen, and the headline was, "Anything you say, officer, just don't use that thing on me." That's what they're here for. People say, oh, it's bad for the taser, people are dying. No, it's good for the taser, people are dying. Because when you've seen people dying from a taser, someone pulls a taser out with a uniform on, you're going to do whatever he says. That's the idea. It's the laboratory mouse, the laboratory rat. Political correctness is another thing. Not only are we physically being given consequences for everything, we now, I don't, but many people do, they are thinking what they say before they say it. They're not even having the freedom and the relaxation to say what they think in case they say something that's politically incorrect. You know, and people say, oh no, you can't say people are crippled, you have to say they're digitally challenged. Well, I've got rheumatoid arthritis in my hands, and I can hardly use them for anything but driving and pressing buttons on a computer. I don't mind if someone says I've got a crippled hand. I have no problem with that, because it bloody well is, okay? I mean, what's the problem? But it's all about And again, you know, the text language is the same. If you think on the level of mind, we think with words. When you have a thought, you're thinking in words. The more over the generations you can remove and reduce the number of words that we use, you eventually do not even have the words to construct a thought with any detail. It's all blandness. And this is what Orwell talked about with his old speak and new speak, where the authorities in 1984 wanted to replace more and more of the old words that you could express yourself in detail with and replace them with newspeak, which were bland and had no real meaning. And if you get to that stage, and that's where they're heading, you know, this text speak, you are, and all this stuff, we're not even going to have the language, not far from now, as the generations move on, that can actually have the words to articulate a thought of any detail except a bland one. That's the idea. It's all a mind game. Well, I love this one. This is a politically correct sign. Caution, this sign has sharp edges. Do not touch the edges of this sign. And it says at the bottom also, the bridge is out ahead. So, this is what we're looking at. Yeah, whose word in your head? Programming the computer. They want the microchip to program the computer. That's why they're pushing this around the world. Microchip your children so you know where they are, put your medical records on a microchip. But the idea of the microchip, like I say, is to access the body computer and manipulate it from within. The media is fundamentally a part of the mind control also, that's whose world is in your head all the time as they manipulate our reality. And it's the same with like the media, as I say, and the way that they do this. Now, computer access. They're trying to access the computer in many, many different ways, and when you kind of realize how the computer works, you start to realize why they're doing what they're doing. All this crap in food is to destabilize the computer